Yep, you heard me right. I balanced every item in TF2. But before we dive into that, first things first, posture check. How are you sitting in your chair right now? Is your back hunched? Is your neck crooked at an egregious angle? These are the telltale signs of goblin posture. And just like you, I suffered from it not too long ago. I work from home, so unsurprisingly, I spend a lot of my time at my desk in an office chair for long periods of time, so I need something comfy to sit in. But thanks to FlexiSpot, my goblin posture is a thing of the past. FlexiSpot sent me their C7 Max chair, and this thing, this thing is simply amazing. This chair is packed with a whole bunch of gadgets and gizmos that make it perfect for long-term comfort, like the adjustable height of the backrest, so tall people and short kings alike can get proper back support. Or what about the adjustable headrest and armrests? You can adjust how you want to sit on the fly. Check it out, I even got the model with the extendable footrest, and thanks to the built-in lean feature, I can kick my feet up, lean back, and ponder the secrets of the universe. If that's not enough customization for you, you can alter the seat depth and the back support. I mean, what's not to love? So, if you want to give this chair a shot, you'll be pleased to know there's a 30-day return policy for a risk-free trial, a 10-year warranty with direct replacement for broken parts, and you can use my code in the description to get the best price. So check out the description and the link in the pinned comment and get yourself one very nice chair. Thanks to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to the balance changes. Alright, so I fixed every item in TF2 with a big asterisk next to that reading, except the ones I think are already balanced. In a hypothetical scenario where I ruled Valve with an iron fist and had complete control over Team Fortress 2's item balance, how would I fix it? Well, obviously, I'd let all 9 classes be capable of using the Scorch Shot. But what if I thought about it for more than 5 seconds? It's no secret that a lot of items in TF2 are stinky, smelly, putrid garbage. And there's a few items I would rather eat a light bulb than play against for 5 minutes. So I decided to put my little thought experiment into action. I created a massive hypothetical balance update for TF2 and helped to create a functioning balance mod implementing all of my proposed changes into the game itself. And in this 3-part series, I'm gonna break down all of my balance changes. And I'm gonna start with the 3 offense classes. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so here's how I'm gonna format each segment. For each weapon, I'm gonna first describe the problem I have with an item. Then, I'll present the solution where I tell you the changes I made to the item in question. Then, I'll present the goal where I say what I hope these changes will do to alleviate the problem. So, let's start simple by talking about the backscatter. This item falls into the camp a lot of other unlocks do, where it's not terrible per se, but it's still pretty far from good. You can use the backscatter in just about any match and you can still do alright, but it doesn't do enough to stick out. Here's the problem. The backscatter tries to promote a flank-heavy playstyle where you surprise your enemies with backshots. Wait, that sounded bad. The backscatter tries to promote a playstyle where you catch your enemies by surprise and then blow their backs out. Alright, whatever, it's good enough. The problem is that the backscatter is only moderately better at flanking enemies compared to the stock scattergun, and the backscatter has so many penalties it's hardly ever worth using the thing. So it just kinda collects dust in most people's inventories unless they really like playing Penis Scout. And you know what? I can respect that. What the backscatter needs is a nudge to make its flanking potential stronger so it has a bigger edge over stock at the playstyle it tries to promote. So here's my proposed solution. Every time you get a mini crit kill with the backscatter, you are now granted a 3-second speed boost. Here's the goal with this change. Now, the user is rewarded for successfully utilizing its upside, and it should be much more rewarding to use. And that speed boost you gain on kill will make the backscatter great for hit and run attacks, or you could use the speed boost to keep the pressure on and keep fighting. Pretty reasonable change, right? I think so. So let's move on to another weapon I'm changing. But let's just say this time, I got a little experimental. The sun on a stick. Here's the problem. This item, alongside the volcano fragment for Pyro, were designed to be comboed together in medieval mode. You light someone on fire with the axe, then bash them with the sun on a stick for a quick 1-2 punch. no one has ever successfully pulled off this combo since 2011. This item sucks in the niche side mode it was designed for, and it's even worse in the base game. The item's entire identity is predicated on variables completely out of your control. The item necessitates a friendly Pyro, and sure, those aren't too hard to come by, but what if your Pyro is terrible and they can never light anyone on fire? What if your friendly Pyro is too good and no one can stay alive long enough to be whacked by your stick? So in order to use the sun on a stick effectively, you need a friendly Pyro who's just good enough to light people on fire, not good enough to actually kill them, and you have to be just close enough to them so you can hit the people they light on fire with your melee weapon. As for the fire resistance while deployed, I've got 2 words. It friggin' sucks. Shoot, I mean, it's bad. It's bad. This item is literal hot garbage. These days, it's as relevant as the game it was a promotion for. To even give the item a chance of being useful, it needs to be reworked from the ground up to put its effectiveness into your own hands. So here's my solution. I kept the motif of being lit on fire in critical hits, but it's not the enemy who's gonna be on fire anymore. Yep, that's right. I reworked the sun on a stick to set yourself on fire. While you are on fire, the sun on a stick will always deal critical hits, and you can set yourself on fire using alt fire. It'll do 25 damage and inflict full afterburn on yourself, but during the period you're on fire, you'll be doing guaranteed unlimited critical hits with every swing. While on fire, the sun on a stick would have the highest DPS of every scout melee by far, with the caveat that accessing that extra damage potential means actively taking damage yourself and putting yourself in a very vulnerable position. I also put some checks in place to make sure you can't just spam this thing for free damage. Firstly, I added an 8-second cooldown to the flame ability, and I made it so critical kills extinguish yourself. So you can't just go hopping from victim to victim with unlimited free crits. This is one of the changes I am very iffy on, but the idea was too funny in my head to not implement, and I let my intrusive thoughts win. The way I picture this item in my head is a desperation move. Say you're in a fight and you don't have time to reload, but you just really want to see your enemy dead. What you do is you take the sun on a stick out, light yourself on fire, and go out in a blaze of glory. Heading back to the realm of reality, let's discuss some changes to a weapon that are a lot less exotic. The candy cane. This weapon isn't completely awful, all things considered, but there's one aspect of the item that seems small at first, but completely ruins it. While equipped, you passively receive 25% more damage from all explosive attacks. One of them being Demoman's grenade launcher. A direct pipe from almost every grenade launcher in the game will deal a clean 100 damage. Increase that by 25% and you get 125, aka the exact amount of health Scout has. Things get even worse when you factor in that grenade launchers don't have damage fall off, so you can get killed instantly by pipes you didn't even see coming from super long distances. Demoman is one of Scout's strongest matchups, and the candy cane completely flips it on its head to the point where you actively have to avoid Demomen and peek around corners like it's goddamn Five Nights at Freddy's. Enough of that. The solution is to simply take that 25% damage vulnerability and reduce it by 5% to just 20%. Demoman's pipes no longer kill you in one shot. Easy peasy balancing. If only every weapon were that easy to balance. Here's one that might be a bit more on the controversial side. The Mad Milk. The problem with the Mad Milk is that it's just way too spammable. By merely clicking in someone's general direction, you instantly gain a massive leg up in any fight, and things get even crazier when you throw it onto groups of enemies, because now your entire team has a massive leg up in any fight. On its own, the ability to provide that kind of healing to your team isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, all of Soldier's banners have similar team-oriented perks, but they aren't necessarily overpowered. The problem with the Mad Milk is just how free it is. You can squirt your milk everywhere to your heart's content, It's refilled when you spawn, it refills passively, and you can even recharge it instantly by using the resupply cabinet at any time. If you want to be a real rat bastard, you can run back and forth between the team fight and the resupply room and constantly spray milk everywhere, giving your team a massive advantage every couple seconds. If we want to balance the mad milk, we need to seriously increase the amount of time it takes for Scout to pump out a jar of the white stuff. So here's how we fix it. You can no longer regenerate mad milk from resupply cabinets, you no longer spawn with it immediately ready, and every time you die, the charge is set back to 0. It also doesn't charge passively over time anymore. Now, it takes 300 damage to charge a full bottle of milk. However, extinguishing teammates still reduces the cooldown by 25% as a reward for being a good little teammate. So here's the goal with my milk changes. Make it much less spammable, and make it a resource you actively have to work towards, like soldiers' banners. If you're good at Scout and you're dishing out damage left and right, you're gonna be chucking around milk just as much as before, maybe even more. But the difference now is that you earned it. So good job, champ. 1, 2, buckle my shoes at the fan of war? Okay, here's the problem. Marking an enemy for death for 15 whole seconds is a pretty good upside. But the problem is that the class it belongs to already does great close range damage. Why go through the effort of getting in melee range, marking someone for death, and hoping a teammate secures the kill, when you can just get the job done yourself in less time with a couple clean meat shots? The Fan of War doesn't really synergize well with Scout's kit, so outside of man versus machine, you hardly ever see this item being played. So here's how we fix that. Now, the Fan of War deploys and holsters 25% quicker. The goal of this change is to turn the Fan of War from a team support item to a combo weapon that also functions as a support item. With the faster deploy and holster speed, you can now whack someone to mark them for death and quickly swap weapons to unleash a high damage combo. I feel like it could be very potent with an item like the Soda Popper or Force of Nature with their faster firing speeds. Overall, this is a simple change that I feel could give the Fan of War much more synergy with the rest of Scout's kit. Another item in Scout's arsenal I'm giving some meaty buffs is the Babyface's Blaster. At its foundation, I think it's a solidly designed item that rewards good Scouts with great movement. But oh my god, using this weapon is such a punishing experience it's not even fun. It's like trying to play Scout in a world where every weapon is the Natasha. It sucks. You work so hard to get full boost, and all it takes to lose everything is getting tickled across the map. I swear, your average grandma could take a harsher beating than a Scout using this item. If the Babyface's Blaster is ever gonna be more fun to use, it needs to be made less punishing. I increased the amount of damage it takes to fully deplete your boost from 20 to 60, and I reduced the amount of boost lost on double jumping from 75% to 50%. No big rework or anything, I'm just tweaking some numbers a bit. Hopefully now, it should take more than a stiff breeze to lose everything you work towards. You're not gonna have to worry about taking chip damage from across the map and losing most of, if not all of your boost. It's in close to mid-range fights where you're actually putting your boost on the line, as it should be. Now, the item should feel much less punishing to use without being so forgiving you can just run at the speed of sound unchallenged. Another primary weapon to get some quality of life buffs is the Shortstop. A lot of people like this item and it's kind of grown on me over time, but damn if this weapon's stats ain't clunky. This item is some sort of Frankenstein's monster hodgepodge of like 5 different reworks over the years. From being a pay-to-win item, to just being okay, to being gutted, and being given a shove for some reason. Seriously, this item is for mid-range combat. Why on God's green earth was it given a shove? Alright, so the item's clunky. In order to fix the Shortstop, let's just remove the clunkiness and lean into the item's strength as a mid-range damage dealer. And while we're at it, we may as well give the shove some buffs because it's here to stay at this point. As far as changes go, I removed the push force penalty, gave the item fixed spread, increased the weapon's ramp up to be on par with other scatterguns, doubled the strength of the shove, and gave the shove a whole assortment of quality of life buffs to make it less clunky to use. The goal of these changes is to lean into the Shortstop's strengths. It's the best primary weapon for mid-range combat as Scout, but something that got in the way of the Shortstop achieving its full potential is random bullet spread that made the item very inconsistent at the thing it's supposed to be good at. You just simply can't trust the bullets to go where you want them to because it's left purely to chance, even with tighter spread. With fixed bullet spread, the shortstop becomes a much more reliable tool for the range it was designed for. And as far as the shove goes, it's not something you're going to be using all of the time. In fact, it's still probably really bad, but at the very least you can shove people off of cliffs with some sort of consistency now. If the shove is going to be a meme stat, at least let it be a funny one. Alright, here's the one you were all waiting for. The item to receive the single harshest nerf in the history of TF2. The Sandman. Talk about a fall from grace. A completely deserved fall from grace. A fall from grace that was 100% warranted. The type of fall from grace so warranted, I want to smoke the same crack as the people who think it wasn't warranted. But a fall from grace nonetheless. Yeah, it's no secret that the current Sandman kinda sucks balls. There's a case to be made that it isn't quite as bad as people make it out to be, but that's a can of worms for another time, and I'm already gonna offend enough people with this video. Point is, the Sandman is an unfortunate weapon, because not only is it seriously unrewarding and unfun to use, for the person on the receiving end of the ball, it's just as obnoxious. It's a lose-lose scenario. For the Scout, slowing enemies isn't gonna do a whole lot for the fastest class in the game. It's not like Scout really has a problem catching up to his enemies. And for the person on the receiving end of the ball, sure, the slowing debuff of the baseball can be pretty easily bypassed and isn't gonna get you killed a lot of the time, but stun effects in multiplayer shooter games always suck to fight against. So how do you even begin to fix the Sandman? Well, first, the stun has gotta go. But considering the stun is really the Sandman's only upside, you basically gotta rework the whole damn thing. So, what does a good Sandman rework look like? Well, first off, it's gotta be fun to use. I mean, I hate to admit it just as much as the next guy, but the Sandman was seriously one of the most fun items to use in the game before it got nerfed. It used to have so much sauce. And then Jungle Inferno reduced its sauce factor to 0. Using it is as dry as the Mojave Desert. So my first priority is giving the Sandman its sauce back. And my second priority is making sure that being on the receiving end of the Sandman ball isn't obnoxious. One common idea I've seen thrown around is replacing the slow on hit with a mark for death debuff. And here's 3 reasons why I am not going with that idea. First off, is that I'm not trying to rip off my buddy Fishstick too hard. Secondly, I feel like it would completely invalidate the Fan of War's existence and make it completely obsolete. And the final reason is that I feel like a class as powerful as Scout really shouldn't have access to a powerful long-range debuff on such an easy-to-use projectile. Getting marked for death at long range wouldn't be quite as obnoxious as being slowed, but getting pelted with a hard-to-avoid projectile and being debuffed just doesn't sound fun on paper. So after mulling it around for a while, I think I've finally thought of a good middle ground. Here's my Sandman rework. Gone are the days of stunning and slowing your enemies. That functionality has been removed completely. Now, instead of slowing enemies down on hit, you speed yourself up. When you land a ball on an enemy player, now you gain a speed boost that scales with the amount of time the ball has traveled, up to a 7-second speed boost on a moonshot. That's nothing to scoff at, as speed is quite possibly the greatest asset you can have in TF2. On top of this new added utility, I've also increased the damage potential of the ball to make it better for long-range attacks. Now, this Sandman has reverse damage falloff like the Crusader crossbow does. The longer the ball travels, the more damage it will deal, up to a base 35 damage. And on top of that, moonshots with the Sandman are now a guaranteed critical hit. Hitting a moonshot with my reworked Sandman deals a whopping 105 damage to your enemies. That's not enough to insta-kill anyone, but it is enough damage to leave a large dent in your enemy's health that you can capitalize on using the speed boost you just gained. With this rework, I think I successfully walked the tightrope and gave the Sandman its sauce back, but without being obnoxious to fight against. It also serves as a good counterpart to the Rap Assassin, because while the Rap Assassin would still be great for short to mid-range damage, the Sandman would offer more long-range damage and utility, so I don't feel like either one would completely overshadow the other. And, speaking of the Rap Assassin, I made some changes to it as well, to help it keep up with the newly buffed Sandman. The first change is a pretty simple one, but a difficult one to explain. See, the Rap Assassin is weird. I'm talking band kid who always tries to talk about FNAF lore, kind of weird. When you launch the bauble, it does 15 damage on impact, then 40 damage over the course of 5 seconds in bleed damage. Pretty simple, right? But during the Tough Break update, the Rap Assassin was giving splash damage as well. And the problem with the splash damage is that it's essentially random how much damage you deal. Anywhere from 4 to 24 damage. That is a pretty large discrepancy, and it makes the weapon's damage output very unreliable. So, let's fix that. Now, you deal a consistent and crisp 15 damage with the splash every time. No more RNG jank. And the second buff I gave to the Rap Assassin isn't even for the Rap Assassin. It's for the Cleaver. Ever since the Sandman Cleaver combo was removed in Jungle Inferno, people have been really missing the combo-heavy playstyle that item promoted. The problem was that it was way too busted. Bringing back the old combo as it was would not be healthy for the state of the game. But I do want to bring back some semblance of that combo playstyle, so here's my compromise. Instead of full crits to stunned players, the Cleaver will now deal mini crits to bleeding players. This new combo isn't quite as powerful as before, but you still are getting rewarded with bonus damage for good projectile aim. This combo is powerful enough to nearly instantly drop a light class and put others on a ticking time bomb till death. However, due to no longer relying on stun mechanics as a crutch to execute, it takes a lot more skill to pull off this new combo, and it gives enemies a chance to dodge your attack. Strong, fun, but not overpowered or cheap. Just what I'm looking for. And that is all of my scout changes. Overall, I feel like most of them were pretty reasonable. I said most! So, let's move on to Soldier, a class I bet a lot of you will agree has quite a few stinker unlocks. So, let's give him some love. First things first, let's start with the weapon in TF2 that deserves to be buffed the most. The Righteous Bison. I swear this item's existence is the closest video game balancing has ever come to being a Greek tragedy. It's something I've talked about at length before, so I'll keep it brief. It essentially went from being a meme weapon to receiving harsh nerfs in Meet Your Match for quite literally no reason at all, to supposedly being fixed in Jungle Inferno, only for that fix to have not been implemented correctly, leading to it being even worse than the Meet Your Match iteration. While it's pretty agreeable that the Gas Passer is probably the worst unlock in the game, as far as weapons intended for direct combat goes, the Righteous Bison is by and large the worst weapon in TF2. So, what exactly is the problem? The problem is hitboxes. The Righteous Bison is a very special weapon in regards to how its projectile hitbox interacts with enemies. With an item like, say, the Huntsman, when the projectile touches the enemy, it deals damage one time. Not the Bison. Instead, the Righteous Bison deals damage multiple times as long as the projectile is making contact with the enemy's hitbox. So in order to maximize damage, you need to try and maximize the amount of time your enemy's hitbox is touching the weapon's projectile. However, unless you graduated with a PhD from Bad Weapon Academy, most of the time when attacking an enemy with the Righteous Bison, the hitbox will only connect once or twice, and that is dreadfully abysmal when the base damage of the item is 20 damage. Oh my god, I want to cry and vomit just saying that out loud. Things get even worse when you consider that the Bison has one of the slowest projectiles in the game, just barely edging out the rocket launcher in speed. To use the Bison, you need to give up the shotgun, have a smaller clip size, sacrifice your ability to damage enemy buildings, have a slower firing speed, and successfully connect one of the slowest and buggiest projectiles in the game for the mere chance of doing like 60 damage if the stars align in your favor. Oh my god, it's so awful, I give up. No more. We're gonna fix the Bison. Here's how. Bleed for... Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Ironically, despite the Meet Your Match version of the Righteous Bison being abysmal dogshit, it was the closest it ever actually came to being a good weapon. Why? It removed some of the jank. Sure, the projectile was still absolutely horrid. For a brief period, it was the slowest projectile in the game. But the update changed the Bison to only hit enemies a single time, instead of the weird multi-hit gimmick it has now. So I'm going to take the idea Valve was going for with that iteration of the weapon and not absolutely butcher the execution. The first change I made to the Bison is removing its ability to hit enemies multiple times. Now, the Righteous Bison will only damage enemies one time on contact with the hitbox. but in exchange, I tripled the weapon's base damage from 20 to 60, as well as increased the damage ramp up. At maximum ramp up, the Bison deals 78 damage, just barely enough to 2-tap a medic. Already, this change improves the Bison tenfold, but let's go even further. Let's get rid of that weird, slow-ass projectile. I mean, come on, the Righteous Bison is a laser gun. What is this wimpy-ass laser? I increased the speed of the Righteous Bison's projectile from 1,200 hammer units per second to 2,100 hammer units per second. Now, the Bison's projectile went from being barely faster than a stock rocket to being just a bit faster than the direct hit. The Bison should actually feel like a laser gun now instead of some dinky Walmart Nerf gun. One of the off-brand Nerf guns too. With just these small few changes, the Righteous Bison goes from being the single worst weapon in TF2 to an item that is actually capable of handling itself in a fight. While the shotgun would still be the better choice for overall sustain and close-range combat, the new Bison would make for a threatening option for mid-range combat and crowd control due to the player penetration. Seriously, this is all it takes to fix the weapon. Valve, please. Moving on to a weapon that doesn't make me want to cry and vomit when I talk about it, here's the Liberty Launcher. This item's whole shtick is that it tries to be a jack of all trades, master of none. But the end result is that it just kinda sucks at everything. Sure, the upsides are cool, but none of that really matters when you're dishing out mere tiddlywinks of damage. If we're going to fix the Liberty Launcher, we need to ditch the jack of all trades shtick and actually give it a defined niche where it can outperform stock. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm scrapping the bonus projectile speed, but in its place, I'm adding a 40% faster deploy speed and a 25% faster holster speed. Also, as a quality of life improvement, it now has the same amount of knockback as stock. So here's my thought process with these changes. The item set that the Liberty Launcher belongs to is all about comboing your items together. You pop people into the air with your rocket launcher to kill them with the reserve shooter, and you rocket jump to use the market gardener. And some of the most fun I've had using the Liberty Launcher was trying out the combo El Maxo popularized, where you use the panic attack and the Liberty Launcher together to essentially vomit out lots of projectiles and damage. That is the kind of playstyle I want to promote, so I changed the Liberty Launcher from a weird mishmash of random stat bonuses to Soldier's Degreaser. With this rocket launcher, you are more mobile, and you can dish out high skill combos for massive damage. But the drawback is that on its own, the Liberty Launcher is much weaker than stock. It requires good skill with combos to reap the rewards of using it. Overall, I think this rework is successful at carving out a new fun niche for soldiers and makes the weapon much stronger as well. Let's show some love to another forgotten soldier primary as well, the airstrike. It's great for bombing, and working towards that elusive 8-rocket clip can be pretty satisfying. But you want to know something that's not pretty satisfying? Reloading. You want to know how long it takes to reload an 8-rocket clip from zero? I could go to college, graduate, start a family, have 5 wonderful children, retire, and come back just in time for the 8th rocket to be reloaded. All that reloading can make the airstrike very tedious to use, and all of those extra rockets start to feel more like a punishment than a reward. So let's fix that. Every time you get a kill with the airstrike, your reload speed is increased by 6%. This bonus stacks up to 5 times, increasing your total reload speed by 30. Now, the more kills you have, the less time you need to spend reloading. You can actually spend your time using the rockets you work towards instead of watching paint dry and huffing glue. So now that I fixed the airstrike, let's focus on its forgotten stepbrother. Probably one of the most controversial items in the game. Look, it's no secret that the base jumper's nerf in Jungle Inferno was probably one of the most contentious in the game's history. Was it overpowered? Did it deserve it? Was it an unwarranted nerf? Because no matter if the changes were warranted or not, the end result is still the same. The base jumper sucks. It's true. My source is the TF2 wiki. See? This is what the page looks like. Don't believe me? Look for yourself. It leaves you a sitting duck in the air for snipers, it can't redeploy in the air, it kills your momentum in the air, and it doesn't negate any of the damage you take from blast jumping. It's a steaming pile of garbage for both classes that can equip it. Sure, maybe you can pull off the occasional surprise play, and you can use it to dodge projectiles, but if you can airstrike, you're better off not bothering with the base jumper, and you should just use the gunboats. If the original base jumper was nerfed due to its spammability, I'll work towards nullifying that while beefing up the item in other places. I'm reinstating the ability to redeploy the base jumper while in the air, with the caveat that there's a 1-second cooldown between redeploys. And I'm adding a 20% damage reduction to blast jumping. That's it. With these changes, you have that extra bit of mobility in the air, but due to the cooldown, you can't be spamming that spacebar anymore. This should prevent the problem of the parachute making yourself hard to hit in the air. I'm also adding a blast damage reduction, so you're punished less as a whole for going for blast jumps. Overall, a pretty meaty buff, but I don't think it's gonna be that bad. Let's start talking about Soldier's big, patriotic feat. I'm getting better and better at segues. The Man-Treads, the long-lost brother to the gunboats that no one uses unless you're running a really gimmicky subclass. This item has a bit of an identity crisis if you ask me. It's an item that heavily promotes rocket jumping, but doesn't do anything to alleviate the massive self-damage it deals to yourself. It wants you to stomp on your enemies, but the risk of doing so is massive. On top of the self-damage you take from rocket jumping, if you miss the enemy's head, you'll be taking massive fall damage on top of that. And what if you land on an enemy's head, but the damage doesn't instantly kill them? You need to shoot another rocket, dealing even more damage to yourself. The risk versus reward ratio is way off. Stomp kills feel great, but are way too punishing if you miss. So in order to lean into the Man-Tread's strengths, I feel like it's only fair to make the item much less punishing, so that they can be used effectively with primary weapons other than the rocket jumper. I added a 90% fall damage resistance while rocket jumping, and I added a 15% damage reduction from blast jumping. Overall, my hope with these changes is to make the Man-Treads a bit more forgiving, as missing a stomp will no longer decimate your health pool, and the small passive blast jumping reduction means you can do more rocket jumps more often. If you're feeling concerned that these buffs to the Man-Treads would make it overshadow the gunboats, I don't think that's the case, as the blast damage reduction from gunboats is still 4 times stronger than the one I gave the Man-Treads. You can do much more rocket jumps with the gunboots compared to the Man-Treads. But the Man-Treads would compensate for the smaller blast jump reduction with the other passive benefits that would make it a good side grade. Woo! All these extensive changes are making me tired. How about we take a break by covering a simple change? The Half Zatoichi. This item's in quite the conundrum because the Half Zatoichi is one of the strongest swords for Demo Knight, and because of that, has received nerf after nerf over the years. But all these nerfs have started to do is make it nearly unusable for its original purpose, as a side grade to the shovel and bottle. Be honest, you probably forgot Soldier can even equip this thing. Nowadays though, the Half Zatoichi has been pigeonholed into the Demo Knight playstyle, which is cool and all, but I'd really like to see this item be usable for soldiers and sticky demos again. So here's what I did. Now, the deploy and holster penalties only apply if the shield item is also equipped. Boom, easy. Now the item is fundamentally unchanged for Demo Knights and Hybrid Knights. However, for sticky demos and soldiers, this item can once again be quickly used in a pinch like it used to. Now, let's talk about a weapon that makes me angry. Urgh, the Pain Train. Ugh. Wanna know why this item ticks me off so much? It's because it's the only direct downgrade in the game, under specific scenarios. See, this item's one and only upside pertains to capturing objectives. This means this item is exclusively beneficial in scenarios where you need to capture a point or a payload. If there isn't a point or a payload to capture, this item is quite literally a direct downgrade, giving you a passive damage vulnerability for not a single upside. Say like, I don't know, the entirety of Capture the Flag, most alternate modes, or simply just being on a defending team. Literally useless. It's such bad game design, it makes me angry. It makes me so angry, I want to vomit all over my computer monitor. All it would take to fix this item in my eyes is giving it a single reason to be used across all maps and modes, so it's not a direct downgrade more than 50% of the time. For starters, I got rid of the bullet damage vulnerability, and while the item is equipped, you receive 50% more health from health packs, but your max overheal is reduced by 70%. Bada bing, bada boom. One of the Pain Train's biggest strengths in its current state is that it can be a good option for surprise backcapping, especially on 5CP maps. And which role on the team is most likely to backcap? A roamer. So, I made the Pain Train an item that benefits roamer playstyles, but makes it worse for being pocketed by a medic. Overall, I feel like this is a very simple rework that makes the Pain Train a great utility for almost every game mode, with the objective capturing stat just being a cherry on top instead of the sole reason to equip the item. Now, for the last change to Soldier, let's talk about the Equalizer. It's pretty common knowledge, but back in the day, the Equalizer and the Escape Plan were actually the same weapon, granting both the speed and damage boost. However, as you can imagine, this was busted as hell, so Valve forced the Equalizer to go through mitosis and split it into 2 separate unlocks. However, the Equalizer got the really crappy end of the deal, because all it does is increase your damage. And with no way to close the gap on your enemies, the second you pull this thing out at low health, you're gonna get breathed on and die. Despite the Escape Plan being the item designed for mobility over damage, it's ironically better at both because it allows you to run at supersonic speeds towards your enemies and random crit them. The damage bonus just isn't enough. If the Equalizer is ever gonna compete with its twin brother, it needs to be given some utility as well. So I gave the item a new stat. While the item is deployed and you're under half HP, you gain a 40% reduction to all incoming damage. While the Escape Plan lets you become speedy to escape or close the distance, the Equalizer lets you do the same thing, but with tankiness instead. In the right conditions, the Equalizer could be great for finishing off enemies while you're at low health, instead of being a death sentence the second you pull it out. Hopefully, with this change, the Equalizer can serve as a good competitor to the Escape Plan, and reclaim at least some of its former glory. And that is all of my Soldier changes, and it's straight buffs across the board, because overall, I feel like Soldier is one of the best balanced classes in the game. None of his unlocks are really that overpowered. I mean, sure, there's a case to be made for a couple of them, but I wouldn't really consider anything in Soldier's arsenal egregious enough to really be nerfed. Now, this next class is gonna be a fun one. They probably have the worst ratio of stinker to good unlocks in the entire game. Let's talk about Pyro. Alright, let's get spicy by discussing one of the most hated items in the game. If you use this thing, the amount of slurs that will be flung your way will make a clan rally look like daycare. You will hear offensive words you didn't even know existed. So what could such a hated item be? Well, it's the Flog, duh. And you're probably gonna hate it when I say this, but I'm only giving it a slap on the wrist. Yep, the crits, the lack of air blast, canceling, that's all here to stay. You're probably having a hard time hearing me right now over all of this screaming you're doing at your monitor, so pipe down and at least hear me out. The Flog punishes bad positioning. If you pop your Flog meter overzealously and push like a stupid moron, you're gonna get dumpstered before your flame particles do so much as lick an enemy player. Those moments where Flog Pyros annihilate your entire team was because they had good positioning and caught you out because you failed to punish them. The Flog isn't overpowered. There, I said it. But there's one big factor that makes none of this matter. Because ironically enough, the Flog's biggest problem isn't even Pyro, it's Medic. Yeah, that big ramble about the Flog punishing sloppy positioning and greedy players, all of that goes out of the window when you slap on some training wheels in the form of a pocket medic. Pocket flogging is one of the easiest and cheapest methods to pub stomp any lobby. While pocket flogging, you get to have full crits and complete invulnerability to damage at the same time. You shouldn't be able to have your cake and eat it too like that. It's ridiculous, it's cheap, and it's way too strong, and it needs to go. While under the effects of the oomph meter, you can no longer be overcharged or overhealed. Boom, pocket flog is gone. No more oomph pushes. Goodbye, good riddance, rip bozo. That's me spitting all over my monitor out of rage. Now that we've talked about one of the most despised weapons in the game, let's move on to its equally despised brother, the Scorch Shot. And to all of the people watching this video that actively use the Scorch Shot, here is your complimentary baby pacifier and Coco Melon sensory video. Look, one of my hottest TF2 takes is that I don't think the Scorch Shot is quite as bad as people make it out to be. People act like this item was made by satanic devil worshippers with the sole intent of bringing upon TF2's downfall, and I really don't think it's that bad. But even if I don't think the immense hate is quite as warranted, I'm not about to play defense for the Scorch Shot either, because at the end of the day, it is very horribly designed. The skill to reward ratio is way off. You could give a chimpanzee a keyboard and a scorch shot, and after it's done ripping your face off and your limbs off, it would dominate a TF2 lobby. The scorch shot requires no aim, inflicts ungodly amounts of afterburn, and has the ability to stun people. Boo, stun mechanics, boo. Something needs to change, so I elected to just give the scorch shot a full rework. And this is one of my most extensive changes so far, so hear me out. Now, the scorch shot charges its projectile like the Huntsman. The projectile speed of the scorch shot increases the longer the shot is charged, with its maximum projectile speed being the same as the Man Melter's. The shot can be charged for a maximum of 1.2 seconds, after which the projectile will be automatically fired. The damage direct hits deal will also scale with how long you charge the projectile for, up to 50 damage at maximum charge. And maximum charge projectiles also create an explosion similarly to how it does now. I also massively increase the push force you take from self-damage, allowing yourself to get to heights around the same as a rocket jump would. As for the new drawbacks, the scorch shot no longer stuns enemies or affects their movement. Flares no longer bounce off of enemies, it no longer mini-crits burning players, and I reduced the afterburn duration by 33%. So here is the goal with this rework. What I'm trying to do is make the scorch shot reward precise aim more and make the item overall much less spammy than before. But I still want to keep its strength in denying objectives, crowd control, and shooting mid to long range distant targets. Thanks to the splash damage explosion being locked behind a charge now, if the Pyro wants to spam at an objective, there's a bigger window between shots now, which gives enemies time to react and counterplay compared to just being absolutely overwhelmed like before. The scorch shot would also now reward precision and be a good option for mid-range combat due to direct hits being rewarded with bonus damage depending on your charge time. As for the changes to its mobility, this item has huge potential for movement plays, and it will synergize particularly well with an item I'll be covering in just a bit. I'm really hoping this rework makes the scorch shot much less ass to fight against without completely gutting the item's usefulness. Trying to make the scorch shot not suck makes my head hurt. So let's move on to something a skosh simpler, the detonator. This item is already perfectly viable and a great item in its slot, so I'm not going to be changing it too much, but I do think it could use some small buffs, particularly in the mobility department. You may be aware, but there's actually a pretty cool exploit you can do with the thermal thruster that allows the user to perform stomp damage without having it equipped. I've seen this exploit used with the detonator to pull off some of the sauciest pyro combos I've ever seen in my life. So I want to take this weird, janky exploit and canonize it into the game as an intended feature. I also just want to make mobility with the detonator stronger overall, because I just want to see some saucy clips. Now, while blast jumping with the detonator, you can perform stomp damage, and I also reduced self-damage from detonator jumping to 30%. Overall, you can perform more detonator jumps at less health cost and go for some crazy stomp combos. I feel like these small buffs will be very welcome additions to Pyro players. Okay, back to giving myself a migraine. The gas passer. What was Valve thinking when they made you? This item is shockingly horrible. It takes a minute of charge time, sacrificing your secondary slot, and the coordination of your entire team to pull off what the detonator and scorch shot can do with a single flare. It's not like Pyro has a shortage of items that set people on fire, so why exactly would you even want to use the gas passer in the first place, ever? The only thing this item is good for is if you want to challenge yourself for no reason at all, or want to pull off the elusive mug root beer combo. But as an actual unlock, this is by far the worst item in the game. So how does one even go about buffing the gas passer to not be completely awful? Well, my thought is making the gas debuff actually intimidating. It feels like Valve was trying to make the gas passer an area denial weapon. This big green gas cloud is screaming, "I'm dangerous, don't come in here." But the problem is that the gas debuff is about as intimidating as this picture of a dog. It's not intimidating. So that's what I set out to do. Make the gas debuff actually scary. Here's how I accomplish that. The gas debuff no longer wears off the second you're ignited. The effect will last until the afterburn inflicted by it wears off. So if someone is doused by gas and lit on fire, the gas debuff would still be active until the afterburn runs its course or is canceled by healing. The next change is adding a new effect to the gas debuff. While the gas debuff is active, all healing you receive is reduced by half, and medibeams from medics and dispensers cannot extinguish afterburn caused by the gas passer. Boom! Now the gas debuff is an anti-healing tool. I really wanted to see if a utility like Ana's anti-healing grenade from Overwatch could fit within the confines of TF2's game design, so I'm kinda using the gas passer as a conduit for that experiment. And I'm hoping this can make the item actually useful. I mean, think about it. What's your first instinct after being lit on fire? Naturally, you seek out healing to nullify it. Now, that healing you receive is reduced by 50%, and it's also harder to heal off the effect using medics and dispensers. This makes you vulnerable and creates an opening for the enemy Pyro and team to act on the gas. It also creates a good counter for pocket medics, as a Pyro can bombard a medic in their pocket with a big smelly gas cloud and reduce their healing, making them susceptible to your attack. With the gas passer changes done, now we can talk about a much simpler change I think everyone can get behind. The thermal thruster. I love this thing. Apparently that's a bit of an unpopular opinion, but it's true. But there's one thing I won't deny, and it's that using the thermal thruster can be very clunky. And a lot of that clunkiness comes down to the deploy and holster animations. Unlike every other item in TF2, the thermal thruster is the only item to have a dedicated holster animation, which means you can't rapidly cycle through your items like every other loadout in the game. If you deploy the thermal thruster, you are locked in until that holster animation completely finishes, and it feels like it takes 3 to 5 business days for that animation to finish. The thing is, I get where Valve was coming from with this feature. The holster animation is there in place to prevent you from using the thruster and switching your weapons instantly after jumping. That much is fine, but the problem is that this animation plays even when you're not jumping. So let's fix that. Now, the thermal thruster's holster animation only plays while you're blast jumping with it, and the item also deploys 25% faster too. There we go. That's all it takes. Now, the thermal thruster should be much less clunky to use, and the deploy speed buff is a little bonus that makes it a little easier to pull out and use in a pinch. The last secondary weapon for Pyro I'm going to be changing is the Man Melter. It's an item that's not flat out awful, but it suffers from a very similar problem to the sun on a stick, where the times the Man Melter truly shines are so situational, it's hard to justify using it. The Man Melter's main strength is the stored crits you gain from extinguishing teammates. But what if the enemy team doesn't have a Pyro? What if the enemy Pyro sucks and they can't light any of your teammates on fire? What if the enemy Pyro is too good and they kill everything they touch, so there's no one left to extinguish? This extinguish mechanic relies on so many variables out of your control, it causes the item to be very unreliable. There's one niche use case where the Man Melter shines, and it's combating Scorch Shot Pyros. You can store a ludicrous amount of crits and beam people from across the map in the right conditions. But as strong as it is, it's a very limited niche, and considering I'm reworking the Scorch Shot to be less spammable too, that indirectly nerfs the Man Melter. So, I need to give the Man Melter a more universal use case to compete with the other flare guns and be a little bit less situational. I started by letting the Man Melter penetrate enemy players to be consistent with the other Dr. Groidbort weapons. I also gave it a big buff to its main upside, as now, for every 150 damage you deal with your primary or melee weapon, you gain 1 stored crit. Just like before, you can farm crits by being a team player and extinguishing teammates, but the Man Melter's strength no longer solely relies on the existence of an enemy Pyro to be worth using. Now, you can gain crits for the Man Melter just by playing Pyro efficiently. Combine that with the player penetration, and the Man Melter can be a demon at long-range crowd control. However, the Man Melter would still be a good side grade to the flare gun because the Man Melter's crits would be finite. You have a limited pool to work from, so you need to make every critical hit count. However, the flare gun can combo much more reliably and has infinite crit potential. Overall, I feel like the Man Melter is now universally applicable to every lobby and is no longer reliant on factors out of your control to perform well. Now, we're on to Pyro's melee weapons, and let's start with the 3rd degree. Here's this for irony. The third degree is the only objective direct upgrade in the game, offering an upside with 0 downsides. There is not a hint of red text in sight. And despite being a direct upgrade over the stock fire axe, the third degree is one of the worst items in the game. Absolute dog water. If your first instinct when you see an enemy medic pocketing someone is to pull out your melee weapon and run straight towards them, 9 times out of 10, you are gonna get dumpstered. Not to mention the item's whole gimmick is reliant on random crits, because even if you successfully get within melee range of an enemy pocket without dying somehow, if you don't get lucky with a random crit, you're gonna do 65 damage. And then, you're gonna get dumpstered again. Sure, technically, the third degree only has an upside on paper, but in practice, the upside is the downside, because it encourages you to play like a bloody moron. So obviously, we gotta buff the third degree. And I really wanna make the hitting multiple people with a single swing gimmick work, because I think it's a neat idea on paper. Upon hitting an enemy, all enemies within a small radius will be struck as well. If you hit 5 enemies with a single swing, it will deal mini crit damage to all affected players. But it can no longer deal random crits, and if you only hit 1 enemy with a swing, the base damage is reduced by 25%. There we go. Now, the third degree is a weapon that's better for attacking multiple opponents at once, but is much worse for one-on-one encounters. Overall, the third degree could be a very good option for pyros that are good at getting the drop on groups of enemies, and I bet getting a mini crit swing off on a large group of enemies is gonna feel very satisfying. Because I'm going over my changes in the order of each class, and this is a 3-part series, it's gonna be a while till we get to Spy. So, for all of the avid Spy mains watching this video, here's a little something to tide you over. The Home Wrecker is unfair. That may seem like a strange statement considering the item has never really been broken or overpowered, but it's true. In this game, there are so many items dedicated to fucking over Spy for no particular reason, and the Home Wrecker has gotta be one of the most egregious examples of this. As a Spy, if you stab an engineer and sap their building, by all means, you earned it. You deserve a medal, and you deserve a little trophy for destroying that engineer's nest, but for some reason, a pyro can come around and undo all of your hard work by simply existing. The Home Wrecker is an item that punishes good spies for successfully doing their job, and I just can't help but feel like that's a bit unfair. So what about the Home Wrecker's ability to destroy buildings quickly? Well, it's nearly useless. The Home Wrecker is able to destroy every building in the game with 2 clean hits, which sounds nice on paper until you realize that most of these buildings are plopped right next to a sentry gun, aka your biggest hard counter is Pyro. Good luck destroying a sentry gun using just your melee weapon and limited movement, because you are going to get teleported straight to Jesus. Seriously, what is it with pyro melees that encourage you to play like a knuckle-dragging moron? There is a way to make the Home Wrecker almost work, and it's by using it in combination with an Uber charge to tank all of the damage and getting close with your melee. It'd be almost efficient if sentry guns didn't have ridiculous amounts of knockback. Once again, teleporting you straight to my friend Jesus. So I need to do 2 things with the Home Wrecker. The first is making it better at busting engineer nests, and the second is to retool the item to be more fair in its matchup against enemy spies. Here's what I settled on. First off, the Home Wrecker can no longer destroy sappers. Instead, hitting a sapper with your Home Wrecker will instead temporarily disable the sapper's ability to deplete health or reverse construction for 5 seconds. After those 5 seconds are up, it will resume sapping as normal, and sappers can only be disabled 1 time each. The second change is that while deployed, you have a 50% resistance to all knockback and air blast. Let me start off by explaining the sapper change. If a pyro uses the Home Wrecker on a sapped building, while the engineer who placed that building is dead, it would only serve to delay the inevitable. However, now, the Home Wrecker would be a tool to buy a friendly engineer time to unsap their building and allow you to hunt down the spy that placed the sapper. The Home Wrecker still has a winning matchup against Spy, but isn't completely unfair or punishes them for doing their job like before. As for the knockback resistance, this would just give the item overall utility, but would be specifically helpful in the case of destroying engineer nests. Now, with a friendly Uber, you can actually take down buildings with the sledgehammer without being blasted into the sky like Team Rocket anymore. Overall, I'd say this is a net buff for the home wrecker and finally makes it more than a I woke up and just really wanted to screw spies over today kind of weapon. Alright, here's a spicy one. I hate the Neon Annihilator. This is seriously one of my least favorite items in the entire game. Sure, it's kinda better with the gas passer combo, but that means having the gas passer equipped as well, and I think we all know how much fun that item is. I seriously don't get the appeal for Pyro Shark, or even just using the Neon Annihilator in general. And apparently that's a hot take, because I get roasted whenever I rightfully say this thing sucks. And I have just one response to that. I've never been wrong in my life. Never ever. So therefore, I'm right and you're wrong. Simple as that. So how do we make the Neon Annihilator better? Well, making it less reliant on water to function is a good start. Turns out the weapon that's only useful in water is a bit hard to justify using in a game that canonically takes place in the New Mexico Dust Bowl. It's not exactly a water park. It's time to take the Neon Annihilator out of the water. But, I mean, the item can't be made great on land either. I mean, that's supposed to be the downside. What if instead the Neon Annihilator was a master of water and air? Got rid of the ability to remove sappers, and now it crits while blast jumping or using the thermal thruster. Pyro Market Gardener. Fuck it, why not? That's all I gotta say, moving on. The Extinguisher. This item has some serious sauce. I love it. It is a 10 out of 10 on the sauce scale. I wouldn't change this weapon for a thing, except that's exactly what I'm doing. The Extinguisher is great and all, but its damage output can be a bit unreliable, and it makes securing kills on light classes feel inconsistent. Sometimes you do everything right and perfectly execute a combo just for your victim to be left with single-digit health. So I'm changing that. I decreased the damage penalty from 33% to 25%, and that's all. This small number tweak is all it should take to make the Extinguisher more reliable for killing light classes. And it should make it more saucy. Because good lord, I love that sauce. Alright, moving on. Sharpened Volcano Fragment. I mean, it should be fairly obvious why this is widely regarded as one of the worst items in the game. And the ironic part to me is that if this item was on literally any other class, it wouldn't even be that terrible. The ability to light people on fire with your melee sounds neat, if only it wasn't attached to the class that does that with every other item in their kit. So why bother? Well, the Volcano Fragment was an item specifically designed for Medieval Mode, where you don't have access to your other fire-based weapons. But Medieval Mode is a niche game mode hardly anyone ever plays, and even then, the Volcano Fragment is even outclassed in the mode it was designed for by the Back Scratcher. There is quite literally never a reason to use it. But I guess that's just the unfortunate law of TF2 weapon balance. The cooler a weapon looks, the more it is guaranteed to suck. It's time to carve out a new use case for the Sharpened Volcano Fragment, and here's how I'm gonna do it. Now, every time you hit an enemy with the Volcano Fragment, they will be marked for death for 1.5 seconds. On top of this, every time you hit an enemy with the Volcano Fragment, it will also increase your universal switch speed across all weapons by 20% for 1.5 seconds as well. But it can no longer random crit, and I slightly bumped up the damage penalty to 33%. My philosophy for this one was to turn the Volcano Fragment into the Anti-Extinguisher. While that item pairs very well with flare guns and serves as a combo finisher, this new Volcano Fragment would pair well with shotguns and serve as a combo opener. Imagine this new Volcano Fragment paired with the Degreaser and the Panic Attack. Successfully hitting an enemy and executing a high damage combo would be a death sentence for any opponent. Unfortunately for you random crit enjoyers, I removed them from this weapon as compensation because I feel like if they were enabled, it could make this item a bit too strong. Still, I feel like this new Volcano Fragment could carve out a new fun playstyle for Pyros with a very high skill ceiling and finally be a worthy addition to their kit. And that should just about cover all of my Pyro changes. Yep, that's all of them. No need to linger on here. Yep, video's over, guys. Click off. Like and subscribe and all that jazz. No, please don't make me talk about this weapon again.
The wound is still too fresh even after all of this time. You can't make me do it. You can't make me do it. You can't make me.
The hot hand! Yay! Just thinking about this item makes me sad. Flashback to 2017, when Jungle Inferno was still rolling out, and I was but a bright-eyed child looking at the website for day 2, and there it was, in all of its glory. The hot hand. It was the most beautiful thing I ever laid my eyes upon. The second I saw that update page, I knew I had to have it for myself. So I waited for the update to drop. I grinded those contracts for countless hours. And after all that time, all my waiting and hard work, my reward was the goddamn hot hand. Talk about a disappointment, this thing blows. Finding out Santa Claus isn't real was less disappointing. In fact, the hot hand was the last time in my life I was ever excited for something. Just looking at the stats, it doesn't seem that terrible, but oh boy, things get real bad when you realize that on top of the damage penalty, there is a massive unlisted downside that your damage is split between 2 attacks. Just one singular slap from the hot hand deals 28 damage. That's less damage per hit than the stock baseball bat. I'm sorry, but Pyro needs to hit the gym or something. Look, I get it. The hot hand is supposed to be a meme weapon, like the fish. You're not supposed to take it that seriously. You use it for shits and giggles. But a weapon like the fish is so bad it's good. The hot hand is just bad. Something's gotta change. We gotta make the hot hand funny again. Let me think of how to buff it. The weapon is your hand. What do hands have? Yes, fingers. What do fingers have attached to them? Rings. No. Too obvious. Fingers have nails. And nails are sharp. And what do sharp things do? Fuck, it's genius. They make you I'm sorry. What has gotten into me today? Third consecutive melee strike always crits. You heal 35 health for every successful slap, and the speed bonus has been increased from 1 to 4 seconds. Look, even mega buffing the hot hand like this isn't gonna let it compete with the likes of the Power Jack or Extinguisher, but at the very least, the hot hand should be fun to use now. The guaranteed crit combo should help mitigate the tickle damage problem, as 3 slaps in a row is enough to take down a light class. The health on hit should give Pyro some sustain while slapping, or be a quick way to recover some health. And the speed boost has been extended to make it more useful. I did it. I made the hot hand funny again. I just wish I could invent a time machine, go back in time 7 years, and tell my past self everything would turn out fine in the end. And that concludes all of my Pyro changes, which means this is the end of part 1 in this grand trilogy. In time, you guys will see parts 2 and 3 of this series, and in between those episodes, I'm going to be hosting playtests for the balance mod. So if you're a doubter, or just want to try out my changes for yourself, you can give them a whirl. If that sounds interesting, join my Discord server in the description, and I'll ping everyone on the server when I'm running a test. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned, because we're just getting started. And remember to check out FlexiSpot, so by the time the next video drops, you can watch it in extreme comfort. Alright, I'm out of here. Have a good one.